In today's video, it is jam-packed with some beautiful Christmas in July DIY inspiration. I'd like to welcome you all to CreArtive by Nature DIYs and Decor. My name is Donna. So this video is a compilation of some previous Christmas in July DIYs that I've created here on my channel. I've conveniently put them all in one video for you all. You're going to see timestamps throughout, so you can just click along to your favorite, as well as there will be a playlist with all the original videos if you prefer to see them that way. So without further ado, let's jump into the DIYs. I have these wood planks that I got from Dollarama, but you can get them from Dollar Tree as well, along with the tumbling blocks. I am going to be laying out the tumbling blocks flat as shown, the length of my wood plank. I am then going to glue those tumbling blocks together to form a bottom. If you're new, I want to say a big welcome to you, and you could tap on the subscribe button to become a part of my community. And if you tap on the bell, it'll keep you up to date with everything I have to share. You can see that it forms a nice bottom for a little wood crate. I'm now going to add some tumbling blocks to form the sides of my crate. It took about 4, as you can see here, and I'm going to glue those together. Once you have the two ends formed, you are going to adhere those to the bottom platform that you created using the other tumbling blocks. Glue them together as shown. Working quickly, you're going to want to add some hot glue and attach the wood planks to your base that you created. Once you have the two side panels attached, you're going to go inside the little wood box that you created and add some hot glue. This way here, you know, everything will be attached really well. I am now going to be mixing some chalk paint and some antique white to create a bit of a softer green color. And I'll mix those two together and then apply a one coat to the crate that I created. I gave one coat of paint to the exterior of the box. I didn't worry about the inside. Once dry, I had decided that I would use this piece metal sign that I picked up from Dollar Tree at Christmas time last year. Using a little bit of hot glue, I am just attaching it ever so carefully. I didn't use hot glue directly to the metal piece because it cools quite quickly before I can get it attached to the box properly. So I'm just adding little dollops of glue as I go along by lifting the metal piece up and then attaching along the way. I'm just snipping off the end of the E as it was a little bit too long for the box. I had these salt and pepper shakers in my stash from a local dollar store, but you can pick them up from Dollar Tree. I'm removing the lids and then placing them inside my crate. You could glue them into place if you choose. I'm now going to add some preserved reindeer moss, and that will help hold the jars in place. I'll show you what this looks like all done up in the end. I have another 4 of these green Dollar Tree wood picture frames. I am going to be removing the backings along with those little brackets that hold everything into place. I'm going to keep the glass, but I'll be setting that aside. And I have got this deco mesh that's got little flecks of snow on it. Again, I picked this up at Dollar Tree last Christmas and I'm using it from my stash. I'm going to cut a piece out that's a little bit bigger than the glass and then place the glass into it, and it creates a really pretty snowy effect through the glass. I have trimmed off the excess deco mesh, and then I'm going to be attaching the glass to the frame using some hot glue. I'm now going to attach all the frames together with some hot glue, and as you can see, they're kind of offset. So I'll glue those all together. Continue to add your frames as shown and work quickly as the glue does dry quick. This next part is optional, but I'm going to add a touch of faux snow just to the bottom edge of each frame. I really like how that looks, and now I'm going to be going in and adding some branches just to the one side of each frame. I love to be able to add some natural elements to my door decor whenever I can, and a lot of times I do use little branches. So I'm just using some hot glue, and I'm just going to place them randomly on one side of each frame. Once you're done with your branches, you can then use a little battery operated LED candle, and that is a cute little lantern, I must say. Here is how my little crate with my jars look with some greenery. I love the natural and neutral look of these pieces. And I love the little flecks of snow that are showing through the glass. Let me know which one is your favorite. So I'm going to just take a moment and just mention that the supplies that I typically use in my Christmas in July projects are things that you can get now, or they are going to be items that I have in my stash from the previous Christmas seasons. So I hope this encourages you to go out and look for some different supplies, either at Dollar Tree, your local dollar store, your local craft store. And hopefully you are able to access your Christmas craft stash so we can create some beautiful DIYs. I am going to do my best to have things linked in my Amazon affiliate store as well, if I am able to find those supplies. So let's get back to crafting. First DIY, you are going to need a little frame. I got this one out of my stash. It's an old one. The glass is missing, and I just removed the tabs from the back. Here I have some mini dowels, again from my stash. I am just going to cut them down to size so they fit the inside of the little mini frame. So now I am going to use some hot glue to adhere these mini dowels to the inside of our frame. I'll be using the hot glue in the center of the frame on the top and the bottom, and again on the sides to apply our second piece. Allow the hot glue to set, and once set, you can then go in and apply some craft paint in the color of your choice. I am going to be using this beautiful brick red color. It's a nice vintage looking color. I find that with primitive style, the colors are really rich and earthy and are darker and give that really nice cozy country feel. So I've given my frame 2 coats of paint and I've allowed to dry well in between. And now I'm going to distress the edges by using a sanding block. Once you have the desired look, you can then go in with a rag and remove the dust. So now I'm going to be coffee dyeing a selection of fabrics. Here I've got the fabric soaking and I placed them in a tray, and then I put those in an oven to dry. And as you can see, they come out a lot darker. They have a really earthy look to them. Here I decided to make the lighter colors darker by adding more coffee. And then you can choose the fabric of your choice. You can see the difference between these 2 pieces of fabric here. And I'm going to cut that fabric down to size. So here I am just measuring the size of my frame, and then I am going to take those measurements and measure out my fabric. Here I'm just trimming off a rough edge, and then I'm going to take some nice sharp scissors and cut my fabric down. So now that I have my piece of fabric to the size that I want, I'm going to take that piece, fold it in half, and then create 2 separate panels. So next I'm going to be using some thinner jute twine, and I'm going to just take one of those panels and I'm going to gather the piece. Now, as you can see, it is a little offset from the middle, as I am going to be tying the jute twine around that gather, and I wanted it to kind of stick above that middle frame portion of that window that we created. So I'm just tying the gather with a basic knot, and then I'll be cutting off the excess twine. I do the same for both panels. So now I'm going to place my fabric panels. Now, I did make these panels a little bit longer as I wanted these panels to glue to the exterior of the frame on the back side. So I'm going to use some hot glue and press the bottom part of the panel into the glue. And then I do the same for the top of the panel. Once you have the first fabric panel in place, you can go ahead and adhere the second panel. So at this point, you can leave this frame as is, but I wanted to cover up the mechanics of my work on the backside. So I'm using this beautiful dark colored scrapbook paper that's got tiny little snowflakes on it. And I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to trace around my frame. Using my scissors, I am going to cut the cardstock piece out and then flip it back over to the right side. And using some tacky glue, I am going to apply a line of glue all the way around the exterior portion of our scrapbook paper. Once the glue is applied, you can then press your window frame onto the paper. I ended up weighting mine down a bit and allowed it to dry. Here I have this really pretty wood star, and again I'm giving it a coat of some craft paint in a really pretty dark green, and I allow that to dry. So once everything is dry, you can then add some jute twine to the sides of our window panel to create a hanger. And then you can go ahead and start to decorate your window if you choose. Here I've got this faux garland. It's kind of like a pipe cleaner that I picked up at a local dollar store. And I'm applying that to the base of our window frame to create a bit of a window box look. And then I find that the primitive country style, they really like to decorate little bits. So I thought I'd decorate the top corner of this frame. So I applied some faux garland there, and here I have a strip of my fabric, and I'm just creating a loose knot, and then I trim it down to size, and using some hot glue I will put that into place on top of that garland that's in the corner. You could go ahead and create a bow if you'd like, but I really just wanted a casual look for this piece. And then I'll add my really pretty green star on top of the fabric. So one thing I have noticed is that with primitive Christmas style, they use a lot of pip berries. So I am applying some of those pretty pip berries that I picked up from Dollar Tree, and I'm just trimming some of them down, applying them into that window box that I created, and then you can hang it on the tree. I think this turned out so beautiful. I absolutely love how it looks. It definitely has that traditional country charm. So for our next ornament, I'm going to be using a wooden spool, some wood slices that are about the same size, and some jute twine. Using some hot glue, I'm going to apply those wood slices to the top and bottom of this spool. I love spool ornaments. I just think they're so beautiful. And I thought it would be fun to create a really rustic country look. Here I have some black and white gingham fabric that was coffee dyed, and I'm going to cut it down into strips. And then I remove any of the excess threads. I'm also going to be using this natural cotton that I had coffee dyed as well. So using some hot glue, I am going to apply that to the inner portion of our spool and then start to wrap the fabric around. And as you can see, I'm applying it very roughly. I don't want this to look perfect. I really want that rustic look. And I think it really creates a nice casual charm, perfect for that primitive style. Using some hot glue, I am then going to just glue down that edge, and then I'm going to continue to add some fabric. This one is that natural cotton, and I'm going to wrap it around, but I'm going to make sure that some of the fabric from underneath peeks through. I really like the primitive style. I think it has a really natural country farmhouse look. So now I dug into my stash and I found these country style jingle bells, and I am going to use a green one to match that added green fabric that I applied to the spool as well. Using some hot glue, I placed that bell into place, and then using some jute twine, I am going to be creating my hanger. So I'm going to create a loop and then tie it off in a knot and cut off the excess twine. And I'm going to cut it off really close to the knot. Now you don't have to worry about it unraveling, as I'm using some hot glue and applying that to the top. I really, really love Christmas time, so I am really enjoying creating these ornaments for you all. It's my favorite time to craft, honestly. So here I am using all these little bits and I'm applying them to decorate the top side of my spool. Now this part is optional. You could just leave it plain, but I wanted to cover up the glue that I had showing. So I thought adding a little twine bow and some of the faux garland that I had, as well as some pip berries, would be a really nice added touch. If you had some mini rustic bells, that would be really cute, all tucked in amongst the garland as well. Once you've got it decorated, it is then ready to hang on the tree. This turned out better than I thought. I really love the rustic charm that this piece has. For our next ornament, I'm going to be using these galvanized stars I picked up from Dollar Tree. Here I am using a sanding block and I'm going to rough up the surface, and then you're going to want to use a rag to clean off any of the debris. Once your star is all clean, you are going to then need some hydrogen peroxide with a misting nozzle. I'm going to apply a coat to the surface of our star, and then I'm going to apply some regular table salt. You can then flip it over, apply some more hydrogen peroxide, keep your fingers clean, and then you are going to add more salt. So what is going to happen is there's going to be a chemical reaction and some corrosion is going to start to occur. So this was just after 30 minutes. And then this is after several hours. And if you wait a full day, as you can see, some rust will form. I rinsed off my star and this is the corrosion I am left with. You could give this a coat of some clear matte spray if you don't want it to corrode any longer. But I'm going to allow mine to corrode just a bit more. So now I'm going to decorate my star. If you want to corrode your piece a little bit more, then don't decorate it at this time. But I wanted to just show you this step, so I just went ahead and decided to decorate it with my pipe cleaner by forming a wreath and adding some pip berries in a dark red and a regular red. You could add some little bows to this, or if you want to add some mini pine cones or bells. This is such an easy project and I really love the effect that it has. So here's our star all decorated, and I'm going to be using my big chomper. It's just like a crocodile, but a larger one, as you can see. And I'm going to punch a hole in the top of the star. So then using some thin jute twine, I am going to create a loop and push that through the hole. And then I'm going to tie it off in a knot, and then it's ready for you to hang on the tree. This star definitely has that primitive country Christmas look that we all love. I think it turned out amazing. As always, I absolutely love to know which one was your favorite. I'll have some more Christmas DIY playlists for you to check out down in my description box below, as well as at the end of this video. I have got some tissue paper from my stash and it's Christmassy, along with some glass candles from Dollar Tree. I am just going to be laying the tissue out and I'm going to measure the amount I need to cover the candle jar. Once you have the size you need of the tissue paper, you'll flip it upside down and then apply some decoupage medium to the outside of the glass jar. I'll be working in sections, so I'll place, here's my kitty cat. He had to see what was going on. So I'll place the jar on top of the tissue paper and then roll the candle jar over the tissue paper, and then I'll go back in and continue to add more Mod Podge along the way. Trim off any of the excess tissue paper that you don't need, and then go over the seam and cover the entire piece with some more decoupage glue. I decided to go back in with a little rag and just remove some of the decoupage off of the shiny part of the trees, as the glue was hindering the shine of those trees. Once your piece is fully dry, you can go back in and tear off any of the tissue that wasn't stuck. Don't worry, that part's getting covered up right now. I have got this really pretty and fun yarn, and I am going to wrap it around the top of the jar and tie it off in a bow. Now you've created a really pretty and whimsical gift or candle for your decor in the winter. For this next candle project, I've got this Arteza Gold Outdoor Acrylic Paint. I love these paints. I will have the link for you down in my description box if you're interested. So using a makeup sponge, I am going to be dabbing the gold paint onto the jar. I am going to apply it heavily on the bottom, and as I go up, I will fade it out. I am going to go back in and apply a second coat, and it really gives it an interesting texture and a really nice rich look. Once the paint is all dry, you can go in and add some decorative twine. This one has a little bit of a gold thread throughout. And I'll tie that off, and it's so pretty. It will look so nice at Christmas time or anytime. And for this next candle project, I am going to be using some gold leaf. I have seen gold leaf both at Dollar Tree and Dollarama. So this time I am going to try out using some decoupage medium. Typically you would use gold foil adhesive, but I thought I would try out the decoupage as that's what a lot of people are using. So I wanted to give it a try. So I'm going to generously apply the Mod Podge or decoupage glue onto the jar, and then carefully get out a sheet of the gold leaf and roll the jar onto the gold leaf. Tear off any excesses and continue to cover the wet spots on the jar. Continue to work in small sections to apply the decoupage glue as well as the foil. You will want to allow the jar to dry really well, and it took about an hour. You can test to see if it's dry. Now, using a soft bristle brush, I am going to gently remove any of the excess bits of foil. You can also use a soft rag and again gently burnish the foil and removing all those excess little bits. I love how this looks. I love that some of the glass is showing through. It looks very, very elegant. I'm going to finish it off with some sheer shimmery ribbon. You could also do this piece using silver leaf as well. All these techniques have really upped the look of these Dollar Tree glass candles. I love the way this gold paint glistens softly on the jar. And I really love the fun look of this tissue paper. And this is my favorite, the gold leaf. I love how elegant this looks. For our first DIY, you are going to need some yarn. I'm using red and black, and I'm also using a 6-inch wide board and some scissors. I'm taking the black and I'm wrapping it around my 6-inch board up to 40 times. The more wraps you do, the larger our finishing project will be. Snip the yarn and then pull it off of your 6-inch board. Once you've got the loops removed, you can then cut through all your loops, and we've created one bundle of the black, and you're going to need 2 bundles of the red. You'll also want some extra strands of yarn as we are going to be tying these pieces together. You're going to overlap your 2 bundles of red yarn in a plus sign and then fold them in together, just like so. Then, using one of your red strands of yarn, you are going to tie off one side of the bundle, and you will do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you tie this off tight, as you don't want your strands of yarn to come loose. So next you're going to need a piece of tissue, and you're going to bundle this up. You could use a pom-pom instead if you desire. So now, using our black yarn bundle, you're going to place that across our red and then place that tissue ball in the center. Pull your red strands over and cluster them to hide that piece of tissue. Using an extra piece of your yarn, you're going to wrap that around the red threads and then tie it off tight. Trim off the excess strands, and then you're going to take the black strings and pull them in around the back end, around your red strands. Now you're going to be using your black strand of thread and wrapping that around the back side and tying it off tight. So in case you haven't noticed, yes, we are creating a yarn bird. These are so much fun to make, and they make really, really cute Christmas ornaments. So once you've got that all tied off, you'll then trim off all the excess at the back end of your bird and just create the look you like. Here I'm just fluffing up my yarn a bit just to create a better shape, and here it is so far. Now it's time to decorate. I've got these black beads that I'm going to be using as the eyes, and I'm just going to use a little dab of hot glue. I'll be doing the same for the other side of our bird. So now I'm going to be using a piece of felt that I had in my stash, and I'm going to be folding it in half and then cutting a triangle shape. Now this is what I am going to be using as the beak. You could use a different color if you choose. I'm just again using some hot glue and placing that in the center of the face of our bird. So this next part is optional. I'm going to be using some 22 gauged wire, and I'm going to create some feet. So I'm just bending the tips together, and I'm going to create 3 little shapes. And then I will be twisting the 2 ends together to create the leg. So using some wire cutters, I'm clipping off the excess, and here we've got our foot shape and our leg. And I'm just going to bend that, and then I'll be cutting it down to size. So again, we're going to be using our hot glue gun, and we're going to place the legs into the yarn on the bottom side of our bird. So again, this next part is optional. I am going to create a hanger for it by using some yarn, form a loop, and then tie it off and then glue it to the top side of our bird. I added a bit too much glue, so I just added another little strand to cover up that glue bit, and then you can hang it on the tree. Isn't this bird just the cutest? They look so good in the tree. I have made these as a set of 3 and gifted them. I love how traditional this little bird looks. So for our next project, I'm using this wood block that I picked up from a local craft store. You can get them at Dollar Tree as well. You'll need some Christmas scrapbook paper, and I'm going to be using a die that's the same size as my wood block. So I cut some paper out using the die, and then I'm going to be using some white craft paint, and I'm going to paint out the edges of our block using some of the white paint and allow to dry. All right, so I'm going to be using some tacky glue to apply the paper to the blocks. I'm not going right to the edge, as the squares of paper aren't the exact size of our block. That's why I painted out the edges with the white paint. Here, I'm just spreading the glue out and now applying the paper, and you can see the white border that's around it. I really like that look. I think it just frames it out nicely. So I'm going to continue to add my glue and paper to the blocks. You can apply the glue straight onto the block, or like I did here, onto the paper, and then just continue to cover the block with the papers. So one thing I kind of did was made sure that it was all balanced. So I had my patterns on opposite ends from each other. And then I'm going to create a hanger. So here I've just got some red trim again. I'll be creating a loop and then tying it off with a knot, trim off the ends, and then using some hot glue, I'm going to place it onto the top of our wood block. Once the glue has set, you can then start to decorate. So I'm going to be using some greenery that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to glue them in around our hanger. Dive into your stash and see what you have. This is a great way to use up all those little scraps we have. Here is some greenery that I had picked up from Dollar Tree, I believe it was, or Michael's, and it's got some really pretty glitter on it, so it kind of has a bit of an icy look. I really like the way that looks, and it gives some different texture. So now I'm going to add some bows. I'm just creating some simple 2-loop bows with some tails, and I'm using some wire, and I'm just going to tie it off like a twist tie. Cut off the excess wire, and then just figure out your placement for your bows and use some hot glue to put them into place. So I ended up making a total of 3 bows. I really like how balanced that looks. You can see that here. I think it looks so pretty. And then you can decorate with whatever you want from here. I'm using these pip berries that I got from Dollar Tree. I thought they had a really pretty traditional look to them. And I'm just going to use some hot glue and put those into place. You could also add some flowers or bells or ornaments would be really pretty as well. Just dive into your stash and see what you have. Once you have the desired look, remove the glue strands and then it's ready to be hung on the tree. This is so pretty. I really like this one. It has a really beautiful traditional look. So I went into my stash again and I found this little red truck ornament I picked up from Dollar Tree. I removed the tree and the wire as I don't need those pieces. And then, as you can see, I have these small circle stickers. I am going to place those over the tires because I am going to be giving this truck a fresh coat of holiday red paint. I wanted the glitter to be covered up and I really wanted a rich pop of red color. Once dry, you can remove those circle stickers, and then I'm going to be using a paint marker and I'm going to fill in the tire. This gives it a really nice, crisp, clean look. And don't forget to do the underside. You could use some craft paint and a paintbrush as well, but I found it was really easy using the paint marker. Allow it to dry well, and then you can fill it in with a white paint marker for the center portion of our tire. So I'm allowing the truck to dry, and now I'm going to be using this embroidery hoop. It's got a plastic inner ring and this kind of rubbery outer ring that looks like faux wood. And I'm also going to be using this beautiful green felt that I had. You can use any fabric you have, trim off the excess, and then you are ready to start decorating. So I'm going to be using the inner portion of this hoop, but I wanted to cover up the seam. So I'm going to be using this faux garland. It's kind of like a pipe cleaner, and I'm going to attach that to the outer ring using some hot glue. If you can't find this, you could definitely use some decorative trim if you have that instead. So my garland didn't quite reach all the way to the top, so I'm just adding an added little touch to the top there. Allow that to dry, and then you can start to decorate the inner portion. I have this bottle brush tree. I picked it up from Michael's, and I removed the base. I like to use real twigs in place of the little base that they provide on faux trees. I'm just cutting it down to size, and then I'll be removing the metal part of this tree and using hot glue. I'll put it into place and then allow it to set. So I'm just going to figure out my placement for my tree and my truck, but I need to trim off the backside of this tree so it fits better within the hoop. And I decided that I am going to add just a little bit of riser so I can have the truck kind of sticking out more 3D. I'm using some little craft sticks for this by attaching to them together and then gluing them to the back side of our truck as shown. So I like how my truck and my tree look together, so now I can start to glue them onto the inner part of our hoop. Again, using some hot glue. I'll be using this really pretty red ribbon trim again, and I'm just gonna create a simple little bow. I needed to hide some of the mechanics, and I also thought it just needed a little bit of extra touch on the upper portion of our hoop. So once I have the desired bow, I'm just figuring out my placement and using, again, our trusty hot glue gun, I'm going to put my bow into place. I'm using the same trim to create my hanger. So I thought for a fun little added touch, I would decorate by adding a little star to the top of our tree. I thought it would just look so cute. And then I'm also going to be using some faux snow underneath the truck, just so it doesn't look like it's just floating into thin air. So I added some hot glue, and then I'm just pushing the faux snow into place. And then I'm also using a paint marker and adding some dots to the background to make it look like fallen snow. Allow it all to dry, and then it's ready for your tree. Isn't this just such a cute ornament? I am really happy with how it turned out. I think it would make a wonderful gift as well as a gift topper. Definitely something I would hang on my tree. So for this project, I am using these wood houses that I picked up from a Canadian dollar store called Dollarama. I thought a good alternative would be these Dollar Tree bird houses, but you could also pick these up at Michael's. Here I have a selection of chalk paints in some heritage colors, as well as one acrylic craft paint in off-white. So I first took all the wood pieces and I put them all together. That way here I knew what way the pieces faced out and then in. Once I had the configuration figured out for my houses, I then started to give all the pieces a coat of paint. I just gave each piece one coat of the paint, and I didn't bother to paint the insides as you're not going to be seeing that part. So I thought it would be fun just to mix my colors up for each house, just like they did back in like heritage times. And so I am just adding a bit of a different color here on the fencing. I thought another neat thing would be to add some glitter paint if you choose to. Now I'm just taking my glue gun and I am gluing the pieces together. This way here they can stay stable as they are quite wobbly just on their own. Once you have your houses all put together, then you could start to embellish. So I have some faux snow and I'm just using my hot glue gun and then placing some of that faux snow into the hot glue. Please be careful. I don't want you to burn your fingers while doing this. Now I'm just going in and adding this faux garland to the peak of the roof. I am going to use my hot glue gun to attach it. You can dress these houses up any style. You could do shabby chic or very rustic look. I'm just keeping my pieces nice and simple. So I'm going to just continue to add snow where I thought that it would look nice and little bits of garland. Again, this is totally optional, and I will be showing you a few other looks that I have come up with on the other houses. Here I have all my house pieces painted, and here is another house where I'm just using some leaf garland that I had in my stash, and I just like the gardeny look of this one as well. And like I said, you can embellish these houses any way you see fit. And here are all my little houses decorated. I added some mini trees, and this particular house I actually didn't go with. I ended up painting it out white, and I just love the way these all look. And here is the little village all put together. This is the white house that I decided to go with. I love the way that one looks. I would love to know how you would decorate these houses. First DIY, you'll need some heavy duty jute twine, and I'm just unraveling some from the spool, and then cut off a strand. Then you will take the long strand and wrap it around your fingers. I went about 20 to 30 times, and then you'll want to snip that off. Using that strand that you had cut, you'll want to place it through all your loops and then tie it off with a knot. So once you have your loops all tied together, you will need another strand, and you're going to be wrapping that around all the strands near the top, as we are going to be forming a tassel. So I like to take my twine and wrap it around a couple times, and then I'm going to be tying it off with a knot. You could use colored twine if you'd like. You could also do this with string, but I really wanted to try and create a really rustic farmhouse look, so this neutral twine worked great. So now I am going to be pulling out more twine, and this time I'm creating a loopy bow, and I am creating 5 loops on each side. So I have another strand of my jute twine, and I'm tying it off with a knot in the middle of our bow, but I end up changing that out, and I will show you what I do a little bit later on. I'm just trimming off the excess ends as I don't need those. So I was going to leave the loops intact, but then I decided to cut through them. So here I am just using my scissors to cut through all the loops, and then I'm going to just kind of fluff that up as shown here, and now you have a tassel. But I am going to do something really cool with this tassel. So I'm going to need 3 strands of just regular jute twine, and I also am going to be using a wire. Tie your strands off with a knot and then weave the wire into the knot. As you can see here, I also have a clipboard. I'm going to take that knot and clip it down, and now I'm going to start to braid our pieces together. As you can see, I am adding the wire in along with one of those strands as I am braiding. Once you have the desired length, you can then just pull the wire off to the side and then knot all your strands together again. This will prevent your braid from unraveling. So now I want to attach this braid to the top part of our tassel. So I'm just going to bend the knot up, and then using some hot glue, I'm going to put that into place, and I'll be wrapping that braid around that top portion of our tassel. but I needed to cut that knot off, and then using just a bit of hot glue, it'll prevent it from unraveling on the end. So now I'll just wrap the braid around the top, add a little bit of hot glue along the way, and then finish by gluing down the other end of our braid on the back side. Again, trim the knot off and use some hot glue to stop it from unraveling. So here you can see that a little bit of the hot glue is showing, so I'm just getting a little scrap of my twine and just add a dollop of hot glue at the back there, and I'm going to use that piece to cover it up, and then you can't even tell that there is some hot glue underneath. Just cleans it up really well. So now I want to add my loopy bow to the back side, covering up that knot. As you can see, we're making a sweet little angel. But I found that this twine in the middle of our bow was too bulky, so I decided to use some wire, and I just used it as you would a twist tie. So I'm going to just trim off the excess, and again use some hot glue to add your loopy bow to the back side to cover up the knot that you'll see here in a minute. There you go, and I'm just covering that up, and then you have a sweet little angel. But again, I wanted to cover that wire. I didn't really want that wire to be showing, so I'm just using a little piece of twine again to cover it up. And again, that works really, really well. So now you can just fluff up your bow, add a knot to the top of the twine, and then it's ready to hang on the tree. I love the look of this rustic twine angel. I think it'll look so pretty hanging on the tree at Christmas time. So for the next DIY, I'm actually going to be using some yarn for the first part. So I'm using this pretty cream colored yarn, and I am going to use one strand along with some loops that I'm going to be wrapping around 2 of my fingers. I will be wrapping it around about 40 times. The more wraps you have, the thicker it will be, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to be using that extra strand I had, and I am going to, as you can see, press it through my fingers and pull it up through the other side. And I am going to be tying it off in a knot really tight around all of our loops in the middle as shown. You want to make sure you pull that quite tight. And then I'm going to be taking my scissors and I am going to cut through all the loops. So yes, I am going to be creating a pom-pom. So you could use some other colored twine. I just wanted to keep mine nice and neutral. And then once you've got the loops cut through, you can give your pom-pom a haircut. So I'm just going to create just a round shape. You could leave it oblong for this particular project, but I just wanted to round it off. I just wanted it to be symmetrical. So now I have this paper tube left over from some paper towel, and I'm just cutting off a ring that's approximately 1 centimeter wide, and I'm just going to trim it off so it's even. Then using that clipboard, I am going to wrap some thinner twine around it. Now I am going around it approximately 20 times. And then I'm going to be pulling all those strands off. Once you have your strands pulled off, you can then cut through just one side of them and leave that nice full length. Now, this is where we're going to be using all those strands. I am going to take one strand and then fold it in half and then put the loop through the middle of our paper tube ring, and then pull the strands up through the front and pull them through the loop and then pull tight. And we're going to continue to do that until we have our loop of cardboard all covered. So again, you're going to put your loop up through the middle of the ring, pull the strands through the loop and then pull tight. Once the cardboard ring is all covered, you can now take all those strands and push them back through the other side by pushing them through the middle of that ring. What we're doing here is creating a hat for our little pom-pom, and you could use some regular yarn or string for this. So now I'm going to be using a pom-pom so I can fluff up our hat. I just shove that in the middle. You could use some fiber fill as well. And then I have an extra strand sitting to the side there, and I'm going to be tying that around all of our strands to create our hat topper. I'm just arranging my strings so you can't see that white pom-pom showing through. So here I've got my string and I'm just going to tie that around and tie it in a knot. So again, just rearrange those strings so you cover up your pom-pom if it's showing. And now you can take your scissors and just trim off the strands at the top. And this will just create that, the little fluff or pom-pom part of your hat. And you can just shape it till you have the desired look. Here I'm just kind of trimming off a few of those strands. I've seen some people take some flame and burn them off, but I kind of like the rustic look here. So now I am just taking a piece of twine and I'm going to create a hanger by tying a knot and then gluing it into the middle of our little hat topper. So now I'm just kind of pressing firmly the twine on the side there of our hat, adding some hot glue and then putting it onto our pom-pom. So as you can see, we are creating a little gnome, so we need a nose, and I like to use wood beads. So I'm just going to decide on the color and then add some hot glue and place our wood bead into place just underneath the rim of our hat. So the hole of the bead is showing on the other side. So I'm just adding some glue and then I'm putting the yarn to cover up that hole into place. And here is our little pom-pom gnome all ready to be hung on the tree. For our next twine ornament, I'm going to be using a piece of cardboard, and I'm just roughly using some scissors and cutting out a tree shape. Now you could trace your tree shape out if you prefer, but I'm just freehanding it. I'm just going for a basic shape. You can trim it down as needed until you have your desired shape and size. So using the heavy duty jute twine again, I am going to use some hot glue onto the cardboard and start to wrap it around this piece. Now this ornament was inspired by some projects that I had seen on Pinterest, and I knew that this would be really easy to recreate. So again, you could do this using some string or yarn, or I have seen jute twine in so many different colors. So definitely check out your craft stores to see what there is. So I'm just adding a little dab of hot glue here and there, and then I'm going to continue to wrap the twine around until our cardboard tree is fully covered. So once you get to the tip of your tree, you just want to add some hot glue and then just finish wrapping your twine around, and then you can trim it off. So at this point you could leave your tree as is and use it for some different projects, but I want to turn mine into an ornament. So I'm just taking some jute twine again, creating a knot and gluing our loop onto the back side of our tree at the top. So for a fun added little touch, I'm going to be using some wood embellishments that I had in my stash. I've got cute little berries and this pretty star. You can embellish these any way you'd like. You could also paint these particular wood pieces. So I'm just using hot glue and I'm going to place the star on the top, and then I'm going to figure out the arrangement for my berries as seen here, and then I'll glue these into place. I have seen people use buttons and sequins. You can use ribbon as well. Anything to decorate these cute little twine trees. This little tree has a great farmhouse country look to it. It's perfect for a farmhouse country Christmas. So I have this little bucket from Dollar Tree, and I'm just cutting down a little piece of dry foam, and I'm going to attach it using some hot glue. I'm going to cover up the foam using some Spanish moss. You could glue it or pin it into place, but I'm just going to tuck it in around the foam. I have a stash of these beautiful florals that I picked up at springtime from Dollar Tree. I'm just cutting them down, and then I'm going to start to poke them into the foam. You could glue these into place if you'd like. I have this beautiful white crocheted lace, and I'm just going to make a double bow, and using some wire I am going to twist it off in the middle and then attach it into my little bucket arrangements. I'm just adding another piece of the lace to the handle of the bucket so I have a place to hang this on the tree. And for my next project, I have this beautiful paper doily, and I have a lid that's the same size. I'm going to trace the lid out onto this pretty pink copy paper and then cut it out. Once I have the paper circle cut out, I am going to use a glue stick and add just a bit of glue to the doily as well as to the paper circle, and then attach the two pieces together. Once dry, I am going to form a cone shape out of the two pieces of paper. I am going to use some hot glue to hold the shape of the cone. I'm going to add a little bit of Spanish moss to the bottom of the cone just to prevent anything from falling right through and poking through the paper. Now I'm going to add some of those full florals and leaves that I picked up from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use some hot glue to stick them inside of the cone. I'm going to use some white satin ribbon this time, and I'm going to make a little bow again and attach it to the front side of the cone. I'm now going to cut a length of the ribbon and glue it to both sides of the cone, and then I have a place to hang it on the tree. So I found these really cute wooden little green picture frames from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be removing all the backing. I am also going to remove those little tabs that hold all the backing into place. I am now going to be cutting a piece of thick chipboard, and I want it to be a little bit bigger than the back side of my frame. So using my glass, I just kind of guesstimate how big I need my chipboard to be, and I actually guesstimated pretty well. I'm going to use some hot glue and quickly attach the chipboard piece to the back side of the frame. And now I'm going to be cutting down a piece of some dry foam to fit the inside of the frame. Once you have the size you need, use some hot glue and attach it to the inside of the frame. I'll now be gluing on some Spanish moss, and I'll just be attaching the moss to the outside of the foam. I don't want there to be a bunch of glue on the top part of my dry foam. I'm just going to be cutting off any of the little strands that are kind of all over the place. I found these faux florals from Dollar Tree. They're little roses, and I'm going to remove the heads of the roses off of the stems. I also had these little bits of greenery in my stash, and I'm going to cut those down, and I'm going to glue those onto the foam backing. I didn't want to add too much of the greenery as I still needed a place to attach my little roses. So using some hot glue, you can see I still have a little bit of a stem there to work with. I'll add a hot glue and then poke the little flower heads into the foam. Again, I'm going to be using this pretty lace white ribbon, and I'm going to make a simple bow again, and I am going to attach it just underneath the roses. Using that pretty satin ribbon again, I am going to glue it on both sides of the picture frame to create a hanger for me to hang this on a tree. I love how these ornaments turned out. They have a really pretty garden theme, very romantic and delicate and pretty. Let me know what your favorite one is. Today, I'm going to be sharing some Dollar Tree Christmas DIYs. I'm starting off with this mini mason jar and some woodland figurines. I picked them both up from Dollar Tree. I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue on the bottom of this little deer, and I'm going to make sure the writing on the jar is at the back side. Place the deer inside along with these little trees that I had in my stash, again from Dollar Tree that I picked up last Christmas. And now I'm going to add a little bit of faux moss and faux snow. I'll be using a pencil just to push the snow and moss around. Once you have embellished the inside, you'll put the lid back on. And then I am going to be adding some red twine from my stash. I'll be using a little bit of hot glue to adhere the twine to the lid and tie it off, and then I'll have a place to hang this little jar on a tree. I'm just adding a little dollop of the hot glue on both sides of the twine, and then I will be adding bows on both sides to cover up my little bits of glue. For our next project, I will be using the packaging left from my garden gnomes and a magnetic tin. I'm going to use the image on the inside of the tin, and I'll be tracing that out using a pencil, and then I'll cut it out to size to fit on the inside of the tin. Don't worry if it doesn't fit exact. I'll be adding some hot glue and then placing the image on the back of the tin. Now I am going to add some of the preserved reindeer moss, and I am going to cover up the inside edge around the image. Now I'm selecting a cute little gnome figurine and a tree, and I will apply some glue generously to the bottoms and apply both pieces to the inside of the tin. Now I am going to add a little bit of the faux moss and snow inside the tin. This next bit is optional. I had this cute little faux mushroom in my stash, and I am going to glue that into place. The lid is a little loose, so I decided to add some hot glue to the rim of the tin and then close the lid on, and then you can see inside. This next part is optional as well. I have this faux garland in my stash, and I am going to shape it so it will fit the top rim of the lid. And I'll hot glue that into place as well. I'm just adding a little bow to where the two ends meet. And now with that same red twine, I am going to be wrapping it around the tin with a little bit of hot glue, tie it off, and then you've got a nice place to hang your ornament on the tree. I love how these little ornaments turned out. They're really fun and whimsical and woodland theme. And you can find these products for the most part this time of year or from the spring. And you can dive into your stash and just use whatever you have. Okay, so for our first high-end Christmas topiary, I'm using a tin from Dollar Tree as well as a Christmas tree from Dollar Tree. I'm filling the bottom of the tin with some rocks, and then I'm going to be placing just some random chunks of dry floral foam and gluing that into place. This next part is optional. Remove the base from the tree, and then I'm using one of those long barbecue skewer sticks from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to place that up the metal tube, and then I'm going to be gluing it into place. I'm just gluing it both at the top end and the bottom end, and then I am going to trim off the stick, and this will allow me to have a really nice and secure stem to place into my foam in the tin. I had this antique gold spray in my stash, and that's what I'm going to be spraying the hydrangeas with. And an alternative would be this Krylon metallic paint. Just use whatever you like. I have these lovely fall mums from Dollar Tree as well, and here are the hydrangeas all sprayed. And I'm also going to be using those leaves that I had in my stash. So you're going to start out by placing your tree into the foam. You could see I struggled a little bit there. That was just from the rocks on the bottom. But I'm going to use some hot glue to make sure that that stem is nice and secure into the foam. And then you're going to cover it all up with some Spanish moss. Now I'm just going in and fluffing up the tree. I'm adding some additional stems from another tree that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to glue those extra stems around the trunk of this tree, and that'll just help to fill it in a bit better. For an added touch of elegance, I am going to use these battery operated lights from Dollar Tree. I am tucking the battery pack into the tin and covering it up with the moss. Just make sure that you can access that pack again so you can change out the batteries as well as access that switch. And then you can just wind the lights around your tree. I'm now trimming the stems of those leaves and adding some hot glue and just placing them in and around the tree. And now I'm going to add the clusters of hydrangea, again just adding a touch of hot glue and sticking them into the tree. This is a really easy way to create a topiary with a very lovely high-end look. I wanted to give this piece a bit of a shabby chic romantic look, so I am going to make some loopy bows out of some cream colored lace trim that I had, and I'm leaving the tails nice and long and weaving those into the tree. I'm also adding just some double looped bows and adding those as well. I really love how this looks with this little tree topiary. I love how this tree looks. It looks very classy and elegant, and it was easy to do. Okay, so on to our next topiary. This one is a little more advanced, but it is sure a gorgeous piece. So again, I'm starting out with some foam. I highly suggest that you use dry foam, not the wet foam, as that will crumble apart on you. So keep that in mind. I glued that into place into another Dollar Tree tin, and I'm adding the rocks for some weight. I found this branch on the beach and I love the natural color of it. I'm just placing it in the middle of the foam that I glued into place. I am going to generously add some glue to that stick and put it into the foam again, and make sure you do add a lot of glue, and that will really keep that stem secure. Some options for you to use for the top sphere is a styrofoam ball. Make sure it's not the compact styrofoam. You can also use the dry floral foam, and I'll just show you what I do. So I create a square block using chunks of the dry foam. You can see I'm cutting it down, and then I'll just be gluing the pieces together. This is a great option if you can't find any styrofoam balls. So this is typically what I do when I create topiaries. So I'm going to just place that block on this top of my stem. I like to cut a hole out, just sometimes makes it easier to put the stem on. And then you're going to generously add some glue to keep it in place. Now that you have your foam block in place, you can just take a knife and trim off the corners and some of the edges, and that just helps to round off the block of foam. Here's a little tip for you all. This is some florist wire, and I'm creating some bobby pin type shapes out of the wire. I use this to anchor my moss onto my foam blocks. Then you don't have to use any hot glue. I'm just adding a bit more foam to my pot at the base of my topiary, and that'll just give me a bit more workspace to cover the foam up with some moss. And now you can just go in and add some moss at the bottom to cover up the foam, as well as add some to the sphere on the top of your branch. Use those floral pins that you created out of the florist wire to anchor all your moss into place. Okay, so now I'm going to be using a Dollar Tree Christmas tree. I am cutting the branches off. This is an inexpensive way to create some Christmas arrangements. I'm then going to cut the longer branches in half, add a little bit of hot glue to the end, and stick them into your foam. Here is another little tip for you all. Pretend that there's a center to your foam and make sure all your stems point in towards that center. That way here you'll have a nice even look to your arrangement. You can see here how all my stems are pointing in towards the middle of the foam. Continue to add some of these faux greenery to your sphere until you have the desired look. Just make sure you leave some room for your florals. Here are some beautiful roses that I had in my stash. They were from Dollar Tree and they are spray painted with that antique gold. I'm just trimming off the ends and poking those roses into my foam block. I'm now going to add some of these fall mums that I just picked up recently from Dollar Tree, just trimming them up, and I'm just using one at a time. And so I had removed the extra blossom and added a sturdy stem from the remaining little wire bits that I'm snipping off. That way here it makes it nice and easy to poke the floral stem into your moss ball. And here is what our topiary is looking for. Like so far, I had a little visitor. Yes, my cat. He could not resist jumping up there and checking out what I was doing. It was a hot day and he wanted to find a nice cool spot. So I had these beautiful champagne gold ornaments in my stash. They were from Dollarama, but I know I've seen them at Dollar Tree. So I'm just removing the hanging portion of the ornament, generously adding some hot glue and pushing them into the foam. I have this beautiful sheer ribbon in my stash, and I wanted to give this topiary a really nice, elegant look. So I am creating 3 larger loopy bows and then about 9 of just double looped bows. And I'm leaving the tails along on these as well. Once you have all your bows made, you can start to add them to your topiary. I like to add a couple at the bottom of the ball on the top there, and then I also sometimes like to decorate down by the pot. That part is optional. It's just a preference. So now I'm just gonna go in and continue to add my bows into place, just randomly throughout the arrangement. Now just trim off the tails and there you have a gorgeous, high-end, very elegant topiary for the Christmas season. I think these arrangements would be gorgeous for a winter wedding. You can tweak it so it could be appropriate for any season. I really love how this Christmas tree topiary came together as well. You can change the colors of it to suit your decor. So for the first DIY, you are going to need some vintage lace. I picked mine up from the thrift store. You will need 3 assorted sizes and feel free to use any colors you'd like. I chose white for my project. You're going to also need a needle and some thread that matches the color of the lace you're using. To start off, I am going to tie off the string onto my lace. I tied a knot and I trimmed off the excess, and now I'm going to be doing a running stitch along the edge of the lace. And as you go along, you will be pulling the thread tight as we are creating a ruffle. So you're going to want to continue to do your stitch and pull, and you will continue to do this until you come all the way back around and form a circle. Trim off the excess lace and then you can finish some stitching as needed, and then also stitch your circle closed. Don't forget to tie a knot so this doesn't unravel. Once your string is knotted off, you can trim off the excess, and then you're going to want to create 2 other sizes. So I also have these pieces of cardstock that are in white that are the same size as my lace circles, and I'm going to be gluing those using some hot glue on top of each other. And in case you haven't guessed, yes, we are creating a snowman. So now I am going to figure out my placement for my lace circles, and then using some hot glue, I'll be adhering those to the cardstock pieces that we had cut out. I used my die cutting machine to cut out these circles, but you could also trace around a circle and hand cut them. Once you have all your lace circles put into place, you can now start to decorate. So here I am going to be using some flat back pearls, and I've got them in cream and a charcoal color, but I end up changing this out. So I am going to be showing that to you a little bit later, but I just wanted to first show you the process. So I'm using 3 of the larger pearls as buttons, and then I'm going to be using 2 of the dark charcoal as the eyes. And I'm just using hot glue to adhere these pieces. So I really like the simplicity of the pearls, but feel free to dive into your stash of supplies, use buttons or flowers, use whatever you have. So now I am going to be creating a nose by cutting out a little tiny triangle out of some felt. Again, just dive into your stash to see what you have in your supplies. Next, I'm going to be using this pretty white lace trim that I picked up from a store called Dollarama, and I'm just going to be making a simple little bow. You could use any other trim that you have on hand. This, again, is up to you on what you have in your stash. So now I made this cute little bow, and I'm going to use some hot glue, and I'm going to pin it just at the neck. You could create a scarf instead, but I thought to stick with that kind of pretty vintage shabby chic look, I thought a bow would work. And you could do this in a different color as well. And using the same lace, I am going to be creating a loop and attach that to the back side of the snowman's head to create my hanger, just as shown. Okay, so I wasn't satisfied with the color of the pearls that I used, so I switched it out for these pretty peachy colored pearls. I removed the other pearls off. I was able to cut them off. And now adding those really pretty peachy colored pearls and also a peachy colored nose, and I am just loving the way this looks so much better. It definitely has more of a shabby chic look. Okay, I think this snowman is adorable. I would love to know what you think of this little guy. I have not seen anything like it. I just think he is going to be perfect on a vintage shabby chic Christmas tree. Okay, so for our next DIY, you are going to want to dive into that stash of ribbons and lace trim, along with some pretty yarns, and we are going to be cutting some lengths of it. As you can see, I'm folding it over my hand as I am going to be creating a beautiful shabby chic tassel. So I'm just going through all my lace and trims. I've got a beautiful selection with creams and this pretty peachy kind of dusty rose color, along with a little bit of a vintage white. And as you can see, I've got them all laid out. So I'm just going to kind of mix up all my colors and textures, as you can see here, by laying them out flat. If any of the pieces have got some unraveling, I just went and tied a knot at the end, and then I just continued to lay all my pieces out. Some of my ribbons had a pretty pattern on the front, so I made sure that was facing down. Then using a piece of string, I placed that in the middle, fold all my lace and trims over, as you can see here. And before I tie my bundle together, I'm just making a few adjustments to make sure I have the look I want. I am also pulling some of my strands out and layering them a little bit differently, just so that the different textures are showing the way I like. Once you have the look that you like, you can then tie your string off by using a knot. That way here, it'll prevent your pieces from falling apart. Before moving on to the next step, I have dug into my stash and I got out this pretty wood pot, and I'm going to be giving it a coat of this champagne gold shimmery paint, and I'm going to be giving it 2 to 3 coats. This is one of my favorite paints that I use at Christmas. I love it. It's put out by Deco Art. I will have the link to it down below for you. I think it's just such a gorgeous, pretty vintage gold shimmer. So once your pot is dry, you are going to then just trim off the excess string on the top there. And then using another piece of string, I'm just going to tie it around the top of our trim gather as shown here. And that will just help keep them clustered together for our next step. So now I'm going to be using my hot glue, and I'm placing a generous amount on the inside of the pot, then placing our trim cluster inside. I'm just using my scissors just to kind of poke it in to make sure it all stays in place. And then I am going to cut through that string that we used to put our cluster together. We don't need that part anymore. That will allow our tassel to flow freely. Now I'm just going to trim off the ends, as some of them were a little bit too long for my liking. This part is optional. You can make all your trims as long or as short as desired. Now to create our hanger, again, I'm using this beautiful lace trim, forming a loop, tying a knot, trimming off the excess, then using a good amount of glue on the top or bottom of our pot, and then placing that knot into the glue. Allow that to set. Once set, you can then start to decorate. I went into my stash and I found some faux greenery along with some paper flowers, and I'm just going to trim everything down to size. This particular greenery is from a pick and it has a really pretty vintage gold color on the tips. I'm just using some hot glue to apply it to where our knot is from our hanger, and I'm just going to decorate that part to give it a really pretty shabby chic vintage look. So I'm just going to continue to layer my pieces around that knot to camouflage it. I had these paper flowers that I picked up from a store called Dollarama here in Canada, but I have seen stuff similar in Dollar Tree and also at Michael's or other craft stores. You could use some faux silk flowers as well. Again, I just encourage you to go into your stash to see what you have. So I'm just going to continue to add my flowers, and then I am going to add this beautiful sparkly evergreen. I love this stuff. I believe I picked it up from Dollar Tree last year. I'm not 100% sure. It's from my stash, so I can't remember where I got everything, but I just really love the look of it. It just adds such a pretty sparkle. Another lovely added touch would be buttons and faux pearls. I think this is absolutely gorgeous. I am so excited to make some more of these. I think it's going to be so beautiful on a very vintage, shabby chic, romantic Christmas tree. So now I dove into my stash of vintage doilies and I found this nice shaped and pattern, and I'm also going to be using some cotton fabric in white that matches my doily, and I'm cutting out just a rough circle, and this is what we'll be using for our next DIY. So I'm just going to layer the pieces, and then I'm going to just continue to cut the fabric down until it's roughly the same size as the doily. So if you are at all interested, I do have a playlist of all my Christmas in July videos for you all. I've got that link down below in my description box. Next, you are going to need needle and some sturdy thread. And again, I'm going to be doing a running stitch along the edge of my cotton fabric. So you'll want to pull gently enough just to bring your thread through, but I'm not going to pull it completely tight once I get around to the start. I want enough room so I can add some fiber fill. I have done a pumpkin in this version as well. I'll link that below for you as well in case you want to check it out. So once you've added the fiber fill, you can pull your string tight and then tie it off with a knot. So now you can place your poof down in the middle of your doily. And now I'm going to again use that beautiful lace trim that I picked up from Dollarama. I'm creating a loop and tying a knot. I'm going to use this as my hanger. So I'm going to generously apply some glue in the middle of our fabric poof and put the knot in the middle as shown. Allow that to set and then place it back in the middle of your doily. Again, you're going to need a needle and a thread. And then you are going to want to start doing a running stitch along the edge of your doily. Here I am just going to knot it off as I don't want my string to come loose. And then I'll start to do my running stitch along the edge of the doily. I love using vintage doilies in my crafts. I have a lot from my grandma, but you can find these at the thrift stores as well. So check out those stores. So once you come to the end, you're going to place your poof back in the middle and then pull the strings tight so the doily gathers around your fabric poof. All right, so now we can start to decorate. I decided that I wanted some loopy bows at the top of our doily. I'm just going to add several loops to the bow and add a few different tails, and then I'm just going to use a wire to tie it off in the middle. I'm going to create 2 bows and I'm gluing them to the top portion of our doily. Once you have your pretty bows in place, you can then dive into your stash and dig out those flowers again along with your faux greenery and trim them down and put them into place in around the bow. This has got such a beautiful and romantic look. I am really loving this so far. So I'm just going to continue to layer my flowers. Some of these flowers actually have a touch of a vintage gold on the tips of them, which I thought was a really pretty touch. Here I'm just using that glittered faux greenery again. Again, it's just such a pretty faux greenery. I really like it. And I'm pretty sure I got it from Dollar Tree, or it might have been Michael's. I can't remember 100%. Here is our beautiful vintage doily that's got a gorgeous shabby chic look. Oh, seriously, I am so in love with this. As always, I love to know which project was your favorite by leaving me a comment down below. Okay, so for my thrift flip, I have got these 2 vintage cream and sugar bowls, as well as some floral foam that I've cut in half. I am going to hot glue those floral foam pieces into the 2 containers, and then I will be adding some Spanish moss to cover up the foam. You could use some hot glue to adhere the Spanish moss, but I just tucked it in around the foam. I had these cute little house ornaments and these vintage ornaments and some bottle brush trees, as well as some faux greenery. So I'm just going to start to place some trees and the little house into place, and I'm just going to generously apply some hot glue to the bottom of each piece. I love to use these little vintage containers for Christmas arrangements. I just think they're so pretty and they have a really whimsical feel to them. So just add as many embellishments as you'd like to create a pretty little wintry scene. I love these little vintage baubles, and I think they add just a nice Christmassy touch to the little arrangements. Don't forget to add a little bit to the back side, as sometimes you will see this from all angles. I absolutely love how this little creamer turned out. So I'm going to be doing the same concept using this pretty little pink vintage house, and I'll be adding all these pieces onto the sugar bowl. You could totally use other types of figurines. I've used little birds before, and depending on the season, you can change up any of the little decorative elements as you so choose. I really love using vintage containers in this way. I just think they are so elegant. I would love to know which one is your favorite. I have got some Pinterest-inspired snowman ornaments to share with you. I'm taking some wood slices that I picked up from the dollar store and this mini popsicle stick. I am going to glue all the pieces together. Here I've got these silver gems, and I'm going to be painting them with some black nail polish to use as embellishments for the face. Another option would be to use some black Sharpie pen. I'm using 3 different sizes of the gems, and then I will be allowing them to dry well. I am now going to go in with this ice crystal fine glitter paint, and I am going to add it to the wood slices just to give a really nice shimmer as the light bounces off of them. Once dry, you can go in and add your gems. I'm using the large ones for the buttons, and I'm going to be applying them with some hot glue. Before I add the face on, I am going to adhere the hat, and I am going to be making that out of a piece of cotton. So I'm just making a hem using some hot glue, and then I'm wrapping the hat around the top portion of the snowman head. Trim and glue the pieces together as needed. I have a piece of yarn, and I am going to be tying a knot off to form a loop, and then I'm going to be gluing this inside the top part of my hat to form a place to hang the ornament on the tree. Once I have my hanging loop in place, I am going to use another piece of yarn and tie off the top part of the hat. Now we'll add the rest of the gems to form the face. I'm using a little scrap of yarn to form the nose. You could use a little piece of felt, a Sharpie marker, whatever you would like to create the nose. I'm adding some orange paint just to make it look like a carrot. I'm using a strip of the smallest gems to create the mouth. I have this really nice decorative chunky yarn, and I've cut it down into some sections, and I'm going to wrap the pieces around the snowman's neck, then glue it into place. Another option would be to use a strip of fabric or some ribbon. And there you have a cute little rustic snowman. Feel free to add some arms if needed. For our next snowman, I'm using this salt and pepper shaker. You can get these at Dollar Tree or any dollar store. I'm going to fill it up with some iridescent faux snow that I had picked up from Dollar Tree last year. I'm using a foam ball as the head, and I'm going to use some hot glue along the rim of the jar and then applying the foam ball. I'm going to be using the fine shimmer glitter paint on the head just to give a little added touch of some shimmer. Again, I'm going to be using a piece of yarn as my hanger, and I'm going to be using the lid as the hat for the snowman. So create your loop and then use a pokey tool to thread the yarn up through the holes on the lid. Use a dab of hot glue to hold the yarn knot into place. Again, using hot glue, I'm going to add some to the rim of the lid and then attach it to the head of the snowman. Now I'll use a Sharpie and add the face. I'm using some vintage buttons and using some hot glue and attaching them to the glass to create the body of the snowman. Now I'm using this really pretty decorative chunky yarn and creating a scarf by wrapping it around the neck of the snowman. I'll use a dab of hot glue to help hold it into place. And there we have two really nice Pinterest-inspired snowman ornaments. I love the way this rustic one looks. I love the shimmer of the glitter paint on it. And I really like the look of this glass One, it looks very vintage and I love the way the light glows through the glass. I would love to know which one is your favorite. I hope you enjoyed this compilation. I really enjoyed putting it all together for you. Let me know down below if you have any questions, as well as let me know what your favorite project was in this entire video. If you need to jump back and check out any of these projects, again, I will have timestamps throughout this video, as well as the playlist at the end of this particular video and down in the description box for you. Stay tuned throughout the month of July, as I am going to have more Christmas in July DIYs coming your way. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.